star of On the Buses and a million other things that we've seen over the years. Listen, before we go say anything else, is it true, this rumour that we've heard, that On the Buses may be coming back?
On the Buses may seem like a show we all know, but hidden inside it are little details almost no one noticed. From behind-the-scenes secrets to errors and unexpected twists on set, the sitcom carried more than jokes. These forgotten pieces make the old comedy feel fresh again. Join us as we get into these little details which no one noticed. The pets were real and came with problems. When people think about On the Buses, they usually remember the loud laughs, the silly battles, and the characters we all came to love. But there was something many viewers never noticed. Real animals sometimes appeared on the show. They were not rented from a trainer or borrowed from a studio. They were the pets of the actors themselves, and they often caused more trouble than expected. Anna Karen, the actress who played Olive, was very fond of animals. She owned a very large dog, and in one episode she brought it to work with her. The dog was not just a quiet background extra. It was huge and full of energy, walking beside her on screen as though it belonged there all along. The dog gave the show a real homely feeling, but it also made filming harder. No one can fully control what a pet will do, and the crew had to be patient with the unexpected stops and starts. Bob Grant, who played Jack, also brought one of his pets into the series. His cat, called Tibbles,
Call our garden, mate. Listen, I wouldn't let my cat soil his paws in your rotten garden. Okay.
was given a proper name in the credits, Tiberius Grant. That sounds sweet, but Tibbles did not make life easy. Unlike dogs, cats usually do whatever they want, and Tibbles was no different. The cat would not sit still, ignored directions, and sometimes delayed the shooting of a scene. Still, instead of cutting the animal out, the cast worked around it. They added the cat's stubborn actions into the story as though it was all meant to happen. These moments may seem small, but they gave the show a warm and natural touch. The animals were not polished actors. They behaved just like real pets at home, and that made the show feel more honest to viewers. Many sitcoms can look staged or too perfect, but the pets in On the Buses made it feel like real life slipping into the comedy. The most important part of these stories is how the actors handled the trouble. They did not stop or complain too much when things went wrong. They simply adjusted and carried on, turning problems into laughs. That same quick thinking and calm reaction showed up in other ways too, especially when things came up all of a sudden. This brings us to some of the things that happened on set that were never planned in the script. Unplanned on-screen moments. One of the most surprising secrets of On the Buses is that not everything the audience laughed at was written down on paper. Some of the funniest or most memorable moments happened by chance. The actors often found themselves in situations where something broke, slipped, or went wrong. Instead of stopping the scene, they carried on. And that is why many of these unscripted parts still feel fresh today. A great example is a scene with Inspector Blake, played by Stephen Lewis. In one episode, his breathalyzer prop suddenly broke apart. The bag fell away from the tube, and it could have ruined the moment. But Lewis kept calm. Without missing a beat, he quietly put the pieces back together and kept acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Viewers at home laughed without realizing it was never in the script. That quick thinking showed just how skilled Lewis was at holding a scene together. There were other times when the cast's natural reactions slipped through. In one episode titled The Injury, if you look closely...
Ready? We're getting to the depot. Hello, Mr. B. Oh, what are you doing at Stan's foot? Just painting my toenails.
You can see Lewis struggling to keep a straight face. He almost bursts into laughter, but instead of reshooting the scene, the team left it in. For fans, it felt like catching the actors sharing a private joke, which only made the moment funnier. These small mistakes turned magic became part of the show's charm. On the Buses was never about being polished or perfect. It was about real characters in silly, everyday troubles, and those unscripted slips fit that mood perfectly. When props broke or when an actor missed a line, the cast didn't panic. They worked around it, often making the scene even funnier than the original script. It also showed how much trust there was among the actors. They knew each other well enough to adapt quickly. If one person stumbled, the others followed along naturally. That teamwork gave the show a loose and lively feeling that viewers connected with. Instead of being staged, it looked like a group of people really living in the moment. Fans who watch the episodes today may not even realize which parts were planned and which were not. That is how smoothly the cast handled these surprises. But for those who do spot them, it adds another layer of enjoyment, like a little hidden treasure buried inside the comedy. These unscripted feel remind us that the cast could make magic out of mistakes. But most times, the surprises were not about props or laughter. Sometimes they came from the actors themselves, especially when a performer looked nothing like the part they were playing on screen. This brings us to one such instance. Olive's hidden glamour. For many fans, Olive was the heart of the comedy in On the Buses. She was shown as awkward and always dressed in the most odd outfits. Her glasses, messy hair, and plain clothes made her the center of countless jokes. But here is the detail that most people missed. Olive's actress, Anna Karen, looked nothing like the character she played. Away from the set, she was graceful, stylish, and far more glamorous than anyone expected. Before joining the sitcom, Karen had already trained as a dancer. She knew how to move elegantly, with charm and confidence, which is a far cry from Olive's stumbling and frumpy image. The transformation was so complete that even people who worked in the industry were shocked when they saw Karen outside of costume. With her wig off and makeup removed, she looked strikingly different, almost unrecognizable compared to the character on television. The decision to make her into Olive was a deliberate choice by the producers. When Karen did her screen test, they saw how easily she could change her appearance with a wig and heavy makeup. That was the key. She wasn't just acting silly, she was disguising herself completely. The plain Olive that audiences laughed at was, in truth, a carefully built makeup. Years later, this hidden side of Karen stunned fans all over again. She posed for a glossy magazine shoot that revealed her true looks.
Nah. You like it?
Readers were amazed at how different she appeared. It proved that Olive was one of the greatest character makeovers in British comedy. The show had taken a vibrant, attractive dancer and turned her into one of the most unforgettable, unattractive characters on television. The contrast between Anna Karen and Olive also explained why her performance worked so well. She wasn't weighed down by the character. She was free to play with the comedy because she knew it wasn't close to who she really was. That freedom gave her performance a sharp edge, and the result was comedy gold. Most viewers never realized the extent of that transformation. To them, Olive simply looked like Olive. But when you know the truth, it makes watching her scenes even more impressive. Everything was carefully built by someone who was the complete opposite in real life. This hidden style behind Olive shows just how much the series relied on clever casting choices. But there were times when casting worked the other way, when a character appeared on screen once and then disappeared completely, leaving behind a mystery that still raises questions today. This brings us to the next point most people missed out on. The vanished busmen. When On the Buses first appeared on television, the audience met a wide mix of characters. Among them was a cheerful and hard-working busman named George, played by Rudolph Walker. He appeared in the very first episode. Been groundbreaking because George would have been one of the first black characters to hold a steady role in a major British sitcom. But something strange happened. After that first appearance, George never returned. Viewers who liked his character were left wondering why he suddenly disappeared. And the truth behind it is not easy to hear. According to Walker himself, he was quietly told that keeping a black character in a main role could harm the show's ratings. In other words, it wasn't his performance that ended his time on the series, it was the television industry's fear of losing viewers at a time when diversity on screen was still rare. This detail, often missed when people talk about the sitcom, shows the limits of British television during that period. On the Buses was praised for showing everyday working-class life with funny acts and honesty, but when it came to including actors of color, it fell short. George could have brought a fresh point of view and made the show more realistic, since London buses at the time did employ people from many different backgrounds. Instead, his absence left a noticeable gap, one that reflected wider issues in society. Rudolph Walker did not let the setback end his career. He went on to appear in other shows and became a respected figure in British television. But for fans who return to watch On the Buses, that missing character still feels like an unfinished story. The brief picture of George in the first episode hints at what could have been a richer and more interesting cast. Yet he was gone before the audience could truly know him. This forgotten detail matters because it reminds us that behind the laughter, television history is shaped by choices, some creative, some political, and some unfair. George's vanishing act was not written into the script. It was decided behind closed doors, showing how much pressure producers felt to keep things safe for viewers of that time. The mystery of George remains one of the show's most telling secrets. But while he disappeared quietly, let's talk about another character who almost never existed at all. The character that almost never existed. If there is one character from On the Buses that everyone remembers, it has to be Inspector Blake. With his bushy mustache,
You talking daft, mate? My garden is 10 times better than yours, 20 times better.
his loud voice, and his constant cry of, "I ate you, butler," he became the face of irritation and authority at the bus depot. Yet, here is the detail that most people never knew. Blakey was never meant to look or sound the way we remember him. At first, the producers had someone very different in mind. The original plan was to cast Dudley Foster, a serious actor known more for dramatic work than for comedy. That choice would have made Inspector Blake a stern, no-nonsense figure rather than the bumbling, love-to-hate character he became. But the direction of the show changed completely when Stephen Lewis came into the picture. After seeing him perform in another production called Mrs. Wilson's Diary, the team realized he had the perfect timing for comedy. His tone, his funny expressions, and the way he delivered lines made him a far better match. Lewis did more than just step into the role. He reshaped it. One of the greatest examples is his famous catchphrase. This was never written into the scripts. It was something Lewis threw in on his own, and it clicked instantly. Viewers loved it, and soon it became the line most associated with the show. What started as a small stuff became the trademark of Inspector Blake. The decision to cast Lewis also changed the balance of the series. Without his constant grumbling and reactions, Stan and Jack's antics would not have been as funny. The clash between the workers and their inspector created the spark that carried the show through many episodes. Even when storylines felt stretched, it was Blakey's presence that held everything together. The mustache, the voice, and the frustration he carried were all part of a character that felt larger than life. He wasn't just an inspector, he was the symbol of rules clashing with rebellion. Fans loved to hate him, but they also would not have enjoyed the show without him. It is no exaggeration to say that Blakey became as central to On the Buses as Stan himself. It is strange to think that this character almost never existed in the way we know him. If the producers had stuck with their first choice, the entire feel of the sitcom could have been very different. But thanks to Lewis, the audience got one of the most iconic figures in British comedy. And while Blakey became unforgettable, the show itself was not always perfect. In fact, if you watch closely, you can spot many small errors that slipped through, little mistakes that most fans never noticed at the time. Let's take a look at some. Blink and miss errors. Television in the 60s and 70s was very different from how shows are made today. Episodes were filmed quickly, budgets were tight, and crews often worked under pressure to keep up with schedules. Because of this, many little mistakes slipped through, and most viewers watching on small screens hardly noticed. But today, with clearer replays and streaming, these errors stand out like sore thumbs. One of the easiest mistakes to catch is the sudden appearance of microphones on screen. In several episodes, you can see a boom mic dip into the shot or hover at the top of the frame. Back then, people watching at home might have brushed it off, but modern viewers can pause and laugh at the slip. It reminds us that the show was made with very little time for retakes. Another type of error came from props and settings that did not stay consistent. In one scene, a bus might have a broken window, but when the camera angle changes, the glass is suddenly fixed. At other times, background extras seem to appear and disappear between shots. These gave the show an unpolished feel, but strangely, that roughness also added to its charm. Fans saw On the Buses as an everyday comedy, not a polished Hollywood product, so the little flaws almost made it more real. Wardrobe mistakes were also common. For example,
They got two machines, you may as well take the washing as well.
Yeah, but wait a minute.
Stan's uniform cap sometimes switched positions, or Jack would be wearing gloves in one frame and have bare hands in the next. Continuity was not the strongest part of the production, yet these errors never hurt the laughter. In fact, rewatching episodes today, fans often point them out with affection, treating them as inside jokes rather than failures. What these mistakes really show is the speed of television production during that time. Unlike modern sitcoms, which can take days to shoot a single half hour, On the Buses was often completed in a matter of hours. The focus was always on the funny part, not on perfection. As long as the jokes landed, nobody worried too much about a bus suddenly changing numbers between scenes or a microphone slipping into view. In many ways, the mistakes are part of the show's legacy. They remind us that the cast and crew were working in a completely different era of television. Audiences loved the laughter, not the details, and perhaps that is why On the Buses became such a classic. Even the mistakes and errors make people smile. But while filming slip-ups can be funny to spot, the real behind-the-scenes stories were sometimes much darker. This brings us to one of the saddest tales, which involves Reg Varney, the star of the show, who battled serious health struggles that most fans never realized during the height of his fame. Struggles faced by Reg Varney. To fans across Britain, Reg Varney was the life of On the Buses. As Stan Butler, he was funny, charming, and always ready with a quick laugh. On television, he looked like the kind of man who had no worries. Yet the truth behind the cameras was very different. Varney's journey was filled with struggles that followed him long before fame and carried on even after the sitcom's success. He was born into a working-class family and grew up in tough times. Like many children of his generation, he learned early about hard work and sacrifice. Before stepping into the spotlight, he took on ordinary jobs just to get by, from being a painter and decorator to working in music halls. His love for performing pushed him forward, and slowly, bit by bit, he built a career in comedy and entertainment. Still, nothing came easily. When On the Buses arrived, it finally gave him the recognition he had been chasing. Stan Butler became one of the most beloved television characters of the 70s. But while fans were laughing at his acts, Varney was quietly dealing with serious health concerns. In the early part of that decade, he suffered a heart attack. It shocked the public because people only knew him as a lively, fun character. Doctors told him to rest, but the demands of television made slowing down difficult. Determined not to disappoint his fans, he pushed himself to keep performing. This determination, however, took its toll on his health. Behind his famous smile, Varney struggled with depression. Fame brought him money and popularity, but it did not protect him from loneliness or stress. Like many entertainers, he carried the heavy burden of always being expected to make others laugh, even when he was not feeling happy himself. Close friends noticed the change, but the wider public only saw the upbeat Stan Butler. Another challenge came once On the Buses ended. Varney wanted to explore other acting roles, but audiences had already placed him firmly in the role of the bus driver. No matter what he did afterward, people always connected him with Stan. That type of typecasting made it hard for him to move forward, leaving him frustrated. He still appeared in different projects, but none reached the same level of success. Even so, Varney's contribution to British comedy cannot be overstated. His character remains iconic, and reruns of the series still bring laughter to new generations. But his story also reminds us that behind every television favorite is a person facing real-life struggles we may never see. And while Varney's battles were deeply personal, this leads us to another cast member who also lived a complicated life away from the screen. Struggles Faced by Anna Karen. Anna Karen, who played Olive, had her own journey filled with both triumphs and heartbreaks. Anna Karen will always be remembered as Olive from On the Buses, the awkward sister whose misadventures brought endless laughs. She wore oversized glasses, clothes, and often looked worn out beside her cheeky husband Arthur. On screen, Olive was the butt of many jokes, yet audiences loved her because she made everyday struggles funny. But away from the set, Anna Karen's life was far more complex, filled with personal highs and heartbreaking lows. Karen was born in South Africa and trained as a dancer before moving to England. Her background in movement and stage performance gave her a natural ability for physical comedy, something that helped shape Olive's clumsy but lovable character. While many might have looked down on such a role, Karen embraced it fully. She turned Olive into a household name, proving that comedy did not always need glamour to win over audiences. However, her career was not limited to On the Buses. She also appeared in films, theater, and later gained a new wave of fans with her long-running role in EastEnders. For many years, she balanced both comedy and drama, showing that her talent stretched far beyond the bus depot. Still, despite her wide range, Olive remained the role most closely tied to her identity. Off-screen, Karen lived through challenges that were much heavier than anything her character faced. She suffered personal heartbreaks, including the tragic loss of her husband, actor Terry Duggan, in 2008. Their marriage had been a strong and supportive partnership, and his passing left her deeply shaken. Friends often spoke about how much she leaned on her work to keep going through such difficult times. Even later in life, she remained a dedicated actress, staying connected with fans who adored her from the 70s. But her story ended in tragedy in 2022, when she passed on in a house fire at the age of 85. The news left fans in shock who had grown up watching her. Tributes poured in, not just remembering her as Olive, but honoring her long career and the warmth she brought to every role. Anna Karen's legacy shows how comedy can leave a lasting mark, even when it comes from playing an ordinary, imperfect character. She turned Olive into someone relatable, and in doing so, earned a permanent place in British television history. And while Karen's story is both inspiring and tragic, she wasn't the only actor from the show to face struggles too. Michael Robbins, who played her sharp-tongued husband Arthur, also had a story filled with challenges that shaped his career and his life, which most people had no idea about. Michael Robbins' story. Michael Robbins may not have had the flashiest role in On the Buses, but his character made Arthur Rudge unforgettable. As Olive's funny and often dismissive husband, Arthur was the complete opposite of the cheeky busman. He constantly mocked his wife, rolled his eyes at her family, and murmured through life in the Butler household. Though the character was often miserable, Robbins played him with such perfect timing that audiences couldn't help but laugh. What made Arthur stand out was how ordinary he was. He didn't have Stan's charm, Jack's playful smile, or Blakey's over-the-top outbursts. Instead, Arthur represented the everyday man weighed down by work, bills, and an odd marriage. Robbins made this character feel real, turning Arthur into the perfect counterbalance to the troubles around him. His presence grounded the show, reminding viewers that funny acts often come from the most ordinary frustrations. But behind the face of Arthur, Michael Robbins was nothing like his screen role. Off-camera, he was a kind and gentle man who cared deeply about his craft. He had started out as a teacher before becoming an actor, proving that his path to television fame was far from typical. Acting wasn't just a career for him, it was a passion that he worked hard to perfect. Robbins enjoyed success on the buses, yet the fame also came with its challenges. Like many of his fellow cast members, he struggled with being typecast after the show ended. To audiences, he was Arthur, and breaking free from that image was not easy. Still, Robbins took on other roles in television and film, including appearances in Doctor Who and The Professionals. He also performed in theater, where his skills as a serious actor were more clearly recognized. Away from acting, Robbins lived a quiet and modest life with his wife, actress Hal Dyer. He valued privacy and never chased headlines or attention. Sadly, his life was cut short when he passed due to cancer in 1992 at the age of 62. His passing was a painful blow for fans who remembered Arthur's constant acts with fondness. Even though Michael Robbins's career after On the Buses never reached the same level of fame, his role as Arthur remains one of the cornerstones of the series. He showed that comedy does not always require big gestures. Sometimes a raised eyebrow or a funny one-line statement can steal the scene.
I suppose you couldn't sleep for want of a fag. Never had a fag out of your mouth, did you?
And while Robbins brought Arthur's weary sighs to life, another cast member carried a very different weight. Let's find out who that cast member is. Struggles off the script. Bob Grant, who played the conductor Jack, had real struggles of his own that were far more serious than anything written into the scripts. Bob Grant gave On the Buses its cheeky spark through his role as Jack Harper, the fun-loving conductor who always had a smile and a line ready. On screen, Jack was the partner in crime to Stan, chasing women, dodging work, and finding fun in every issue. His energy brought a lighthearted balance to the sometimes odd atmosphere of the depot, and audiences quickly grew attached to his charm. What many fans did not realize, however, was that Bob Grant had actually worked as a bus conductor in real life before his acting career took off. To help pay his way through drama school at RADA, he took a job on the buses. Yet his time on the job ended all of a sudden. He was dismissed after crashing a bus. The irony of this incident only made his later role on television more fitting. He knew the rhythms, language, and frustrations of the job, which made his performance feel natural and authentic. Grant's stage experience turned Jack into one of the most popular characters on the show. His playful banter with Stan became one of the series' trademarks, while his ability to make even the smallest joke land kept viewers laughing week after week. But while Jack was always chasing fun, Bob Grant's real life was not nearly as joyful. After On the Buses ended, Grant found himself trapped by the role that had made him famous. Casting directors could only see him as Jack, the smiling conductor, and he struggled to secure new opportunities. Unlike some of his colleagues who managed to reinvent themselves in different genres, Grant carried the heavy burden of typecasting. This struggle was worsened by personal battles with bipolar disorder, which left him facing periods of deep depression. Although he tried to keep working, including stage appearances and small television roles, the shadow of Jack Harper followed him everywhere. For a man with so much talent and energy, it was heartbreaking to see how much he longed for recognition beyond the cheeky conductor. Tragically, in 2003, Bob Grant passed on. The news saddened fans who had loved his performance, leaving behind a legacy that was both joyful and deeply sorrowful. Despite his struggles, Grant's contribution to On the Buses remains unforgettable. He gave the show a heartbeat of fun and spirit that could not be replaced. Jack Harper may have been a character, but Bob Grant's personal connection to life on the buses made him the real thing. Looking back at On the Buses, the little details no one noticed make the sitcom even more enjoyable. They add depth to the comedy, showing how much heart and effort went into every episode. On the Buses was more than jokes and funny faces. The little details hidden in the show still surprise fans today. From cast secrets to errors on set and struggles behind the scene, these moments remind us why the sitcom remains special. Sometimes it's the smallest things that keep a classic alive. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.